Now this is a bit of information that seems to have flown under the radar relatively. I didn't make a video on it months ago because I didn't think people would be interested, silly me. However, there's only so many videos you can make about Knights of the Old Republic before you begin to run out of decent topics. Hurry up, Aspyr.
It will be some time before we're ready to show more.
Anyway, now as we all know, the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake by Aspyr was announced nearly 6 months ago, which is crazy to think it's been half a year already, and as I reported in my Let's Talk About These KOTOR Rumors video, the game has actually been in pre-production for quite a while now, and I mean years. Full production actually started at the beginning of this year. However, Aspyr didn't miraculously get this project. It probably took them months upon months of building a pitch that eventually netted them the approval of Lucasfilm so they could begin working on the game. But we also know that Aspyr weren't the only company to pitch the idea of a KOTOR remake or remaster to Lucasfilm. And in saying that, we can only assume that many other companies created potential pitches for Star Wars games, and given that Bethesda is working on an Indiana Jones game, I wouldn't put it past Obsidian actually pitching for Knights of the Old Republic that was probably rejected. Anyway, after Aspyr's announcement, Trent Oster, I don't know how to pronounce that, who was actually one of the co-founders of BioWare, took to Twitter to congratulate Aspyr on the success of the KOTOR Remake's announcement. But he also shared an interesting little bit of insight into the pitch that he shared with Lucasfilm for a potential KOTOR remake. Trent actually left BioWare in 2009 and along with another former BioWare employee formed the publishing company Beamdog and, to my knowledge, the developer within that company Overhaul. Now Beamdog are the company that did the Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. They also worked on the Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition and the Planetscape Torment Enhanced Edition. So it seems that this company were already pretty well known for reinvigorating old RPG classics from the early 2000s, late 90s, and they did indeed set their sights on Knights of the Old Republic as their next big project. So they pitched to Lucasfilm the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic Reforged Collection. If you've seen the enhanced edition of Beamdog's other products, you would probably know that they're not incredibly expansive remasters or remakes. They have essentially taken very old games and given them slight resolution upgrades and made them more accessible to general audiences on modern platforms. But they haven't really done much to them in the sense of changing the fundamental game. But we know that Trent didn't intend for the KOTOR Reforged Collection to be a remaster, as many outlets are claiming. They actually intended for this to be a complete remake. Now, given this game was called a collection, that would mean both games, and also he didn't pitch this to EA because journalists can't do their job, they're just claiming he did, so I'll do it for them. He was actually pitching this to Lucasfilm because they were trying to get the rights to this specific part of the Star Wars universe, which he went on to answer in another tweet separate, which journalists couldn't seem to look through, and EA don't own the rights to Knights of the Old Republic, Lucasfilm do. After Trent congratulated Aspyr on Twitter, he then shared a screenshot of a portion of his pitch document, and while we can't necessarily read too much into exactly what's on there because it's blurred, we can take some measured guesses on certain things. And he also went on to explain in a tweet the difference between a remaster and a remake from his perspective, and classified that this pitch was intended to be a remake. Now I'm going to touch a little more on that a bit later about what this could mean for the future of KOTOR. So if we look at what Trent has shared, we can see only 6 out of the potential 12 titles, and all 6 of them have a key point that they're trying to address in what they want to do with the remake. So this is the vision, the opportunity, the key selling points, the core pillars of the game, and the high definition improvements. As I just said, calling something a collection would only make one assume that this would be more than one game, and of course Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 are essential to each other, and I think the guys at Beamdog understood this when they were creating their pitch for the collection. But there is one specific thing in the first panel here of vision that I find very interesting. If we zoom in and look to the bottom, we can see 3 separate Roman numerals, that is clearly 1, 2, and 3. Now 1 and 2 are connected together in a bracket, and while this is a complete assumption on my part, I think it's an interesting one though. 3 is kind of separated from the first 2, but they're all connected under one line that is specifically highlighted in yellow. Now this is in the section about a vision for Knights of the Old Republic, and we know that Star Wars titles are often numbered in Roman numerals. So my assumption here is that they were actually talking about a collection with a total 1 and 2, with the potential for a third game to be made by this company in the future. And I say this because the Roman numeral for 3 is separated from the first 2, which are connected together, but they're still encompassed by the overall bracket for Vision. And if this assumption were to be true, I find it interesting that companies may have pitched the idea of a KOTOR 3, a sequel, and it was rejected by Lucasfilm again. Unfortunately, we can't read anything in the opportunity section of the slide. However, if we move to the 4th section, which is key selling points, we can actually make out some interesting things here. So we know that they had intended to keep the iconic Star Wars story as seen in the first box. The second box is clearly stating engaging tactical combat, so they intended to keep the original combat system similar, if not the same. And lastly, what I find very, very interesting is the complete experience in the third box. Now, as I mentioned a minute ago, we harken back to slide 2, where there's 3 different Roman numerals, with a third one separated from the first 2. And we know, as Knights of the Old Republic fans, that Knights of the Old Republic was never a complete experience because it never got a true conclusion. Again, this possibly adds some fuel to the fire of my idea that this was actually intended not just to be a remake, but a pitch for a potential sequel should it succeed. Now, as we can see, core pillars, I can't make anything out here no matter how hard I try, and the same goes for HD improvements, I can't make anything out at all. However, my only problem with this section of the slide is that if this game was a remake and not a remaster, we wouldn't be talking about high definition improvements. Because a remake is essentially a ground up recreation, you wouldn't be improving upon something in high definition, you would literally be remaking something with a brand new engine, with a new visual style. So while Trent claims this was a remake, I find this section of the slide a bit odd, but I could be reading into that a bit too much. Now, if we round this all out, I think it's ultimately evident why Beamdog didn't get this. Beamdog is a very, very small studio, it has limited financial backing, and it also has very, very few employees. So to achieve something on this scale would be very difficult, and they would have had to have got a lot of funding, whereas if we look at Aspyr, not only were they overtaken by the Embracer Group, they were given close to $100 million for the budget of the Knights of the Old Republic remake. Something tells me that Beamdog wouldn't have had anywhere near the resources to create something on the scale that Aspyr is clearly aspiring to do, pardon the pun. And Aspyr are just bigger in scale and have many, many more employees. But with that said, I do find it kind of fascinating that one small company had pitched this entire project, not just a remake of KOTOR 1 like Aspyr have announced, but a remake of KOTOR 2 as well. Now, this is where we put on our tinfoil hats, because I don't think Aspyr would have just pitched a KOTOR 1 remake. Again, this is just assumption on my part, but if other, smaller companies had pitched a KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2 remake, what happens if a KOTOR remake is successful, which is quite likely if done right, and where does that leave Aspyr and Lucasfilm? Now, I think that you know the answer to this question. It would simply lead to a Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 remake. And I think the fact that another company was so openly pitching a remake to both 1 and 2 gives me the impression that Aspyr also intend to remake both games. And if we're lucky, maybe a third, but again, that's just my hopes. Also, truthfully, if we look at the quality of the enhanced editions that Beamdog have produced, a part of me is kind of happy that Beamdog didn't end up getting it. Now, this is no shade to Beamdog whatsoever, they brought back some incredible classics to modern audiences in these enhanced editions. But when we consider the quality of some of the remasters and HD collections of other games, I don't think what Beamdog did with Baldur's Gate and Planetscape Torment is too incredible. But while I say that, Aspyr also don't have a track record of making any big AAA games either, so it's kind of an irrelevant point, but yeah. Regardless, I want to know what you think of this pitch. Let me know down in the comments below if you think that this collection should have been what was made instead of the remake by Aspyr, and whether you think that some of the points in this pitch lead potentially to the future of Knights of the Old Republic. As always, don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, it helps me out a great deal, and perhaps consider subscribing to join the biggest growing Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic community on YouTube. I'll see you guys in the next video. But until then, may the Force be with you. Always.